All right, so you got a hand for us here, Graham?
Yeah, so I'm on vacation in Dallas, and that's not, where I'm from. So this is a 2-5 hand out of TCH Las Colinas, I think.
That's like is that right? So it's like the second Dallas location or something?
Yeah, I think so. I think it used
Yeah.
to be called TCH Social, maybe. I'm not sure.
What's the deal over there? I heard somebody had said that there was a Euro infestation over there recently, at least in the higher stakes games in Dallas, but I don't know if that's all gone. They come in waves a lot over there.
I mean, so I think there were 3 2-5s going and like a lot of like 1-2s. I actually was sat next to another CLP sub. They tried to open a 5-10 and he told me that the 5-10 is usually terrible. The 10-25 is usually pretty good. And so I just stayed in the 2-5 and it was like a little reggy, but not like Euro-y.
I don't know if they've changed it since I lived in Austin for 2 years, but 2-5 would be a huge game because it is in essence like deep stack. It would be played with a straddle, and there were no caps on any of the games. So you would rarely ever get any game that was larger than 2-5, except if you're on live streams. But the 2-5 was like a big 10-20. It was the equivalent to a big 10-20. I've heard that like the law just put some caps. I don't know about these other places. So it might sort of make the game sort of more in between than what it was when I was living in Texas.
Yeah, so whenever I play at the lodge, I usually play their 1-3 1K cap. This game was 2-5 1500 cap, and then the home like the game I play in like usually is 2-5 1K max, but it's a match the stack, so
But this game has a hard 1500 cap. Okay.
hard 1500.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it's more like a regular 2-5, like a big 2-5, but not like a 10-20.
yeah,
Okay.
and so they played nine-handed. So this hand was straddled, which that was probably only happening between like 10 and 25% of the time. It was not like on consistently.
Okay.
So it's 2-5-10, 2300 effective with the main villain. And I am in the small blind. So +1 opens to 35, +2 calls. I call in the small blind with black deuces, and the big blind in the straddle call.
So straddle +1 to 35, +2 calls, hero calls with deuce in the small blind, and then the big blind and the straddle call.
Yeah,
And
I got a couple fold pre comments, but I think it's got to be okay in a time game.
well, if you heard me in the previous call with our buddy Will Keys, we talked specifically about this. I definitely don't have an issue with this. With small pairs, I think calling with something suited is definitely a losing play, like a suited connector. People sometimes want to get in there like a 9-8, 5-6 suited. That's definitely very negative EV. But until I see differently, that guys from Texas aren't going to like lose mountains. Even the field callers with top pair are better. I still think that this is an okay and perfectly reasonable call. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ways. Is that right?
Yeah, 5 ways, and I don't think I said this, but +1 seemed like a reg, and then +2 seemed like a more solid reg. So the opener and +2 are both kind of early position regs. So
Okay.
so to the flop, we have 185 or so in the middle. I have Ace of Hearts, Eight of Diamonds, Deuce of Hearts.
Ace of Hearts, Eight of Diamonds, Deuce of Hearts. So totally, 2 heart board and you flop bottom set.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I check, big blind checks, and the straddle actually donks here for 60.
Interesting. Okay.
So now the preflop razor actually folds and the +2 player calls.
So +1 folds the preflop razor, +2 calls, and it gets over to you.
Yeah, and so the straddle had about 1K or so to start the hand. So I think, bottom set in particular, it's obviously, I think, a raise here. So I go to 260. The big blind folds, and now the straddle actually folds.
So you raise to 260. It goes 60 call. You go to 260. Big blind folds. Straddle folds too.
Yeah, so he donk folds, which was funny.
So straddle folds, and then what? The guy in the field calls plus 2 calls.
Yeah, yeah. So
So
he,
yeah, this is interesting because I mean, I actually didn't expect the straddle to have a donk fold range here all that much. It's kind of rare because I was like, what do you think the straddle donks out we here with like into the pre-flop razor? It's going to be like a lot of sort of heart draws in given situations. This plus 2 guy is obviously like a flat caller in the field, and
yeah, he's flat called 3 times now.
yeah, I mean, he's flat called in the field. Sure, he could have a heart draw, but I don't think he's supposed to just be folding ace X here. And then when you look at the setup, I mean, again, sometimes it's very, very easy to give players too much credit. But this is the way that I would look at this if I was the guy in the field. Then we can take it for what it's worth, right? It would seem to me that you would get to have more of a bluffing frequency here, given this post-flop setup, which is this, as opposed to you check raising the actual pre-flop raiser that might have made a C bet into 4 or 5 people.
Yeah,
Right?
because the straddle's capped. Plus
Yeah,
two
it's
is
just
probably
weird.
somewhat capped. And then like I can like by check raising I can really attack the straddle in the middle because if he calls he still has +2 to act behind him.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, even like, say for example, I was the plus 2 guy and I flatted with like ace 4 suited, right? And instead of the straddle donking on the flop, the pre-flop raiser like made a C bet and I called, and then you check raised. Even if like the pre-flop raiser like got out of the way, I'm not saying that I'd 100% fold, but I would be way more apt to release my hand given that setup when the pre-flop raiser C bet and you check raised a bet and a call than this one where I just feel like you could have some more bluffs. Although I will say though, you should be, what are you V-pipping though out of the small blind here, right? Like, would you make this play with like something like 9-10 of hearts here because the straddle donked?
Probably not 9-10 of hearts because I don't really think that's a hand I really want to be piling money in with, but maybe like a hand like a pair and a flush draw, like 7-8 of hearts, 6-8 of hearts, and then some. Because I think like with kind of the configuration and how deep I am, I think I could have hands as bad as like king 7 of hearts down to like
Really?
king 10 of hearts. I think king jack of hearts I would probably mix with pre-flop, and I think king queen of hearts I would pure 3-bet.
So you check raise to 260, big blind folds, straddle folds, and +2 calls. I'm just saying that the whole point of that is I think that he is left with some weak aces that he has to call down with. Obviously, he could have hearts here too. So you put in 520 plus the $60 donk 580. It looks like it's what, like 765?
Yeah, that's what I have.
All right. So 765 to the turn here with bottom set on ace 8 deuce against a field call. Okay.
Turn is the king of diamonds, so we get double flush draw.
Front door hearts, back door diamonds, ace X of diamonds now is available. Okay.
Yeah, so it's ace deuce of diamonds, like ace 8 of spades, ace 8 of clubs. Those are really the only aces up I would expect. Like I don't think this guy's V-pivoting ace 8 off, ace deuce off. He seemed better than that. I don't think he ever has ace king. I think he would pure 3-bet that pre-flop.
Ace deuce of diamonds would be one combo, which I would still find rare, not raising necessarily against a straddle donk. Remember, not the pre-flop raise or c-bet, but a straddle donk. But I mean, I would be taking some large sizing here.
I could see maybe like ace 8 trapping like a little bit more. But once again, like with the front door flush draw, it's tough to say what this guy would do with that hand specifically. So I bet 600 into 765.
Yeah, and I didn't mean like bet like a thought like over bet. I think okay, 600. It's just one of these ones where see, it's interesting because like I said, if I put myself in this guy's spot, this king is a blank for what the range is that if I'm gonna hold on, right, with like ace 4 or something like that. The only thing that might change is if somehow you were doing this with a nut flush draw and then, you were like, well, I got to try to get this guy off an ace. I got more picked up more equity, or, Broadway hearts, jack 10 suited, queen 10,
Yeah.
queen jack, something like that, picks up a gut
jack,
shot.
Jack 10, queen jack, both kind of turn combo draws, and then like king X of hearts. He could think he turns more equity with king X of hearts. Like if I ever had like a ace jack here, I don't think I would play it this way, but like he could theoretically turn some, outs versus.
Right. I'm kind of thinking about from his perspective of like calling down with a weak ace here. Does this king really, does it, I think you still probably have to, because of the
Yeah, I
whole
think I
straddle
think it was
donk.
double flush draw too.
Yeah. So you bet 600. Okay.
Yeah, I probably took like a minute and a half before I bet, just trying to like calculate pot size and figure out like a good size to leave a good river size.
Hmm.
He called. He didn't snap, but he probably called within like a minute 15 or so.
All right. So plus two calls. And now you've put in 1200 on the turn. So the pot looks like it's 1965, and you have put in
We have like
like,
1300 back.
okay, so you've got about 1300 back. Again, it's ace of hearts, eight of diamonds, deuce of hearts. Graham over flatted the small blind with deuce, deuce, multi-way pot. So we flop bottom set. The straddle, which I keep coming back to, he's the one that donked into the +1 pre-flop raiser here. +2 called. Graham check raises, folds back to +2, who calls, turns a king of diamonds, ace eight deuce, king, double flush draw. Graham bets 600, +2 calls, 1965 with about 1300 left. Okay.
And so now we get the river, which is the ace of clubs.
Interesting. Because this was a last minute submission here. Graham, I was looking for another call, and I know you DM'd me here on Discord. So I knew your calls were good anyway. So I didn't really look at this one in depth. And I was looking at it sort of like very, very fast. And I thought that you were actually up against the preflop raiser here, which of course you're
Right.
not, right? This is
If
against
I'm up against the pre-flop raiser, it's a much worse
it's
spot.
much worse. It's much, much worse, right? So this is a very, very, very interesting river because there's a couple things going on here, right? Like he either missed a draw. He missed a draw, right? And it's like, okay, well, he's not going to call anything anyway. So do I give him a chance to, bluff the draw? So let's say that he's missed a draw, and I'm considering king acts a missed draw here because I don't think that that's going to continue to call a bet anyway. So we'll consider king acts a missed draw here, or he has an ace.
Right.
And you might think, well, the best of both worlds here would be if I check, maybe he'll bluff a missed draw, but shouldn't he be betting like trip aces, like ace four, ace five, something like that? My counter to that argument, though, even though people don't value bet enough at these types of stakes, is that actually, if I was your opponent here, Graham, and I was holding on, and I had like ace four, and you checked me on the river,
Yeah, you check
it's
back.
a check back. You either missed a draw or you're sandbagging something, right? That's it.
Right.
There's no.
Which.
So it kind of makes me
kinda like you
it
said.
kind of makes me want to bet here and just go for it because you still have sandbags if you check. So checking doesn't get like the bluff in all the time. And it just would really suck if he has a weak ace and he checks back something that he would have called with trips. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and if I was playing with like someone like I had more hours with and I knew, I'd say my image at this table, like my image was like I sat down, nobody knew who I was. I was up like $4,000 in my first hour, and I was just like reading like really pure. So I would say I had like a pretty like decent image. So this guy probably identified me as a rig.
But so Walker Gibson in the live chat says aces will bet, busted draws might bet. That's the argument, Walker. But again, as I deconstructed that, I don't think aces will necessarily
a good enough
bet.
reg will realize ace X is just kind of.
Well, it's kind of funny. You get a good reg that recognize the situation, and then you get a showdown monkey who just wants to take the pot down too. That might check it back as well. So that's kind of the issue here. And I just feel like if I was in that spot and I actually had the front door draw, I would kind of smell that something was a little bit fishy. So
Right.
this is why I would probably bet. This is why when I was thinking that the guy was the preflop raiser, I'm like, oh wow, this is crazy, right? Because with the preflop raiser, you might make a case if ace queen bets, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a little bit different, and then you're losing to ace king. This guy never has ace king, right? So that's why I would bet. What did you end up doing?
So just real quick,
Yeah.
Nate said he would slap me for recommending this. What do you think about like blocking like 200 here and trying to, I think Ace X might feel obligated to raise a bet that small
I
and then
don't
maybe
think
miss
so.
draws.
The
Okay.
the problem with blocking is that I don't
We're
think.
kind of short to do it
Yeah,
too.
not even just that. It's like, what are you represent? See, the purpose of a block would be to get raised, right? So you want to get raised by a missed draw, and I still think that looks really, really fishy to somebody who has a missed draw. And then you want to get raised by a weak ace. But again, for the same reasons, though, if we're worried about a weak ace checking back, a weak ace is not going to raise a block at the end. It's just going to call. So I don't think this is the time to throw in what you are trying to say is reverse block, a block trying to induce a raise.
Yeah, so I think the mistake I made here was I saw that river card and I immediately knew it was such a good card for me and that, if he had trips, he would most likely bet if check two, and if he had a misdraw, he would fire. So I actually checked like 2 seconds after the river came out, which I think is a mistake to kind of give off like a timing tell. But so I check, and on like the villain was in the tank for so long, I thought he didn't realize I checked. Like he was sitting there really, really thinking about it.
One other thing too, Graham, I know I washed over this. Like you said, you guys have like 1,300 left. Here's why. Another thing too to take into consideration as opposed to an all-in bet. Although if we were to sort of live no lock and say that all ace X calls here on the river and all ace X always continues, then it is an all-in. I was just thinking more of like you could take a smaller sizing here to also possibly get a call from a king, like 600-700, something like that.
It would have to be specifically King X of Hearts, though.
Right. So you checked pretty quickly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he tanks forever. I mean, he's sitting there like I very nearly like asked the dealer if like he knew where the action was. But so I'm sitting there and he thinks and thinks and thinks and thinks and thinks, and he finally checks it back. I table, and he said afterwards he had Queen Jack of Hearts.
So villain checks behind with Queen Jack of Hearts. You know what's interesting here is that I know we talked about you possibly bluffing 8x of hearts here on the flop, like an 8-7 of hearts. If you have that pre, we talked about how that's kind of sloppy pre. So it really depends on how you sort of construct your pre-flop range. But if I was Queen Jack of Hearts here, I would. I don't actually hate the
If
check.
you go for it, you get it. But if you go for it, you can get a fold from 8x of Hearts and King X of Hearts.
Well,
Don't you think?
King X of Hearts, maybe. I was just kind of thinking of like the other draws that you might have here. If you were more in the straddle, like where you would actually have these hands, he beats some of your draws, like 4-5, 5-3, right? 5-3.
Yeah, but I'm not checking
4-5.
those. I mean, how can I check five high whenever I could jam and still try and get King X of Hearts, Queen X of Hearts,
Well,
Eight
you
X of
wouldn't think
Hearts
so,
to
but
fold.
he might just think that you just gave up, though. I'm just saying it's a little bit weird out of this particular configuration because I just wonder it's probably not set up this way because I don't think you have any of those hands in the small blind. So with him with Queen Jack of Hearts, he might want to get you off of 8x of Hearts and King X of Hearts. If that were the case, then he probably wouldn't want to take all in sizing. I just think that something kind of smells a little bit fishy here. I don't necessarily hate his check back because he is also blocking a lot of the heart draws that you might have that might contain like the King X. Although depending, again, it all goes back to how you structure a pre-flop. If those are all three bets from you, like the King, Queen of Hearts, King, Jack of Hearts, types of holdings. What I'm saying is he has Queen, Jack of Hearts, so you don't have those heart holdings in your hand. So I don't know if I don't necessarily hate the check back by him. What's more interesting though is what you should do on the river, and I think that's what I'm saying is that it's just if not all the ace X are betting, and I think we've come to that conclusion. I think your hand is a bet here.
Especially if he's checking back Queen High.
Yeah, that too. All right, Graham. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.